Good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Boylan, Betsy Wade Boylan's older son. I'm here in Stonington, Connecticut with my father. My brother is with us from his home in Connecticut, and many other relatives and friends and co-workers of my mother's are also part of this call. Welcome, everybody. I will not attempt to summarize my mother's long and full life in just a few minutes. Of course, she will always be remembered as the lead plaintiff in the sex discrimination lawsuit against the New York Times. As was her way, she dismissed her lead status as a mere accident of alphabetization. But as she mentored generations of younger women journalists, she became the best known. The highlight of her year was JAWS, the annual Journalism and Women's Symposium. As one participant told me, they followed her around like ducklings. As she aged, my mother's greatest fear was falling into senility or decrepitude. Her fears were, for the most part, unrealized. She remained active and clear-headed until the last few weeks of her life. Her astounding memory for dates, names, and places remained undiminished, making her a living resource of the history of the New York Times and New York journalism in general. Sadly, she never wrote a memoir, claiming that Nan Robertson's book, The Girls on the Balcony, was all anybody needed to know about her life. My mother was a giver. She volunteered, she contributed, she helped out friends, she donated gallons of blood, she cajoled, she mentored, she urged people to quit drinking, stop smoking, or finish writing that novel. My mother was a radical. She was progressive, pro-choice, pro-union, pro-minority rights, and anti-war. I think that two events in her life radicalized her: Camp Manumit and being fired from the New York Herald Tribune. She always said that she had no idea what possessed her mother to send her to Manumit, an old-time left-wing summer camp in Pauling, New York. It was there that she read The Grapes of Wrath for the first time and learned the words to Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. The Herald Tribune's story is more familiar to those who knew her. After working in the Trib's women's department for a little over a year, she was let go when she became pregnant. Though she despaired at the time, it was the first in a chain of events that led to the lawsuit against the Times. I was the one who got her fired from the Trib. When my brother was born 4 years later, she negotiated a 6-month unpaid leave of absence from the Times and thereby kept her job there. She stayed on at the Times for another 43 years and probably would have worked there even longer had they let her. But in the summer of 2001, when she was 72, the Times discontinued the Practical Traveler column and her job was gone. I've said before that the one thing my mother couldn't do was do nothing. In retirement, she mentored, she traveled, she wrote, she sewed, she did everything except sit still. She brought that same energy to bear on our home. Trips, projects, and holidays were all attacked with the same zeal. And that zeal extended to friends, coworkers, and the world at large. Perfect strangers would be admonished to pick up their trash. And somewhere in New York, there is a woman who made the mistake of bringing her cigarettes to the health club and got a stern lecture from my mother, as well as a good look at the scars from her lung surgery. My parents were married for 68 years. My father was her traveling companion, co-author, and sounding board. They raised 2 sons through the social revolution that was the 1960s. She loved her 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren with all her heart. She leaves behind a large circle of friends whom she cared about deeply and cared about her in return. Her absence is felt by all of us. All right. The next to speak is my brother, Ben Boylan.
Hello, this is Ben. I'll introduce myself briefly. I am the younger son of Jim and Betsy. Am I being heard? Give me a nod, Richard, will you?
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. Yes, I am Jim and Betsy's younger son and apologize for my invisibility at this moment. I am married to Karen Calway, and we have 3 adult children in descending order of age: Carol, Jennifer, and Christopher. Carol is married to Dave R. Carey, and they are the parents of 2 girls, Lily, 4 years old, and Sophia, 1 year old, making us grandparents and my parents' great-grandparents. Our family is very grateful to everyone for attending this event to remember Richard and my mom and my dad's partner in life, known to most as Betsy. Although we're not able to gather together in one location, it is important and meaningful to meet and share our thoughts and memories about a unique individual who has had such an important presence in our lives. My mom was a person of many facets, some of which I did not appreciate until later in life. It would be easy and a cliche to say that she was a complex person, as extraordinary people are prone to be. I don't quite see it that way. She was possessed of an unshakable set of beliefs, the dignity of all work and of all persons, the necessity of organizing and of collective action, the importance of mentoring, generosity, clarity and truth in words, her abhorrence of violence and war, intolerance of injustice, the primacy of family. Her readiness to engage the world on all these fronts is part of what made my mom extraordinary. So deeply held were her values that it seems there was really no other way for her to go about her life. My mom's tremendous generosity was matched only by her industriousness. She was truly an artist, and her banners, tablecloths, garments, and blankets are treasures. In the late 1980s, my parents bought a piece of land in Stonington, Maine. At the time, they were about the age that Karen and I are now. Their interest in and work on the property showed a different side of my parents. Their prescience was strong. This property has been the site of so many happy family gatherings, including some spanning 4 generations. Becoming a grandparent and later a great-grandparent brought my mom great joy and fulfillment. Notwithstanding external differences, my late father-in-law, Everett Calloway, better known as Lovey and Poppy, shared certain traits with my mom. The ability, when needed, to be as tough as nails, while also being able to show tenderness. And certainly, a high level of commitment to all endeavors, i.e., keeping things moving. And courage. It's no secret that my mom endured harrowing medical problems that might have crushed a less determined person. Despite all these difficulties, she was not one to express self-pity. On the contrary, over the years, my mom countless times expressed great gratitude for the people and events in her life. I do not think this was a psychological exercise, but instead a genuine reflection of her feelings, especially as her mortality put matters into even sharper relief. Thankfully, my mom was still pretty sharp in her final months and still had a wicked sense of humor. I'll close by relating a story from April 2020. On a tree behind our yard, there appeared a pattern of lichens that looked rather like Lyle Lovett. I shared a picture of it, observing that it appeared on Easter Sunday. Her reply follows, ... And behold, despite the exertions of the womb which bore him to keep him away from organized religions and their peculiarities, yet did he learn to speak in the tongues of the wasp, or as his uber mater would have parsed it, the tongues of the asp, she hewing to the belief that all Anglo-Saxon Protestants were, perforce and forever, white. However, that may be parsed, and despite generations of miscegenation, misere meaning to mix, thou understandest, not error as in mistake. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you for joining us in remembering my mom, Betsy Wade.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. The next speaker is my daughter, Leah Boylan.
Hello. Growing up as Betsy's granddaughter, she's of course been a big part of my family since I was born, always at the forefront with organizing the branches of our families. I've also been well aware since I was young of her illustrious career and many of her long list of accomplishments. But I ended up spending the most time with her in her final 5 years when we were both living in New York City. And I have to say that having the chance to get to know her personally when I was an adult like her and being able to drop by her Upper West Side apartment to see her on a whim was a true gift. My cousin Jen and I discussed the minor marvel of Grandma going absolutely anywhere in New York City and having a small fan base just fawn over her arrival. As her granddaughter, I can't overstate how frequently I was told, gosh, you're so lucky to be related to Betsy. She did the most incredible thing for me. Normally the story went, I would not have my amazing career without Betsy, or I'm a better writer, I'm a better family member, I met my partner, I'm better off in XYZ way because of Betsy. Sometimes it was truly all of the above. I'm sure many of you in attendance have these stories yourselves, and I just want to highlight the universality of your experiences. Anyone in doubt need only look at the comments section of her Times obituary. So many people feel that Betsy personally improved their lives in a crucial foundational way. In 2016, I was traveling to New York City frequently, mostly to visit friends, so I impulsively decided to apply to jobs there and move, figuring it was a nice bonus that I also had family living in the city. But let me tell you that being in proximity to Grandma Betsy was the highlight of living there. Grandma directed most of my husband's and my cultural excursions in the city. The latest Whitney or Met exhibit she liked, shows like My Fair Lady and Admissions, walking tours, film forum movies, exhibits she curated herself. As she played guide to the city for us, she passed along her deep and enduring love for New York City. And I have to say that the New York things she suggested for us were exactly the things that we ended up loving about it. More than that, though, she gave me a window into both her present day and past life by including me in the cocktail hours after work near her in her apartment, speaking engagements where she sometimes took minor jabs at New York's elite, and a Jaws gathering in Arkansas where she was interviewed at least 3 times over only a couple days. I ate up the chances I got to hear her talk about being the only woman among men at her job, especially since at the time, I was the only woman on my team at a tech startup. 2 years ago, I was planning to stay in New York for the foreseeable future, and yet here I am, having recently departed for Boston. I'd be lying if I said my grandma's death didn't play a role in that. Now that I'm more removed, I can fondly look back at all the people who had come up to gush about Betsy and how she changed them, and I can also recognize that I'm one of them.
Thank you, Leah. Next speaker is Jennifer Boylan, another granddaughter of Betsy's.
No, it's not. She have a picture.
Okay. Hello. Sorry for the awkward angle. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jennifer Elizabeth Boylan. I'm the middle child of Betsy's younger son, Ben, and I am Betsy's second granddaughter after my sister, Carol. This is a poem I wrote this week that captures just a glimpse of the many memories we share with my grandma. Once when I was a young adolescent, we were standing on a subway platform. A very thin woman approached me to say repeatedly, "They're picking your brains for diamonds and pearls. They're picking your brains for diamonds and pearls." You said to the woman softly and firmly, "Let her be." After she moved on, you said, "Picking your brains for diamonds and pearls. That's a good start for a poem." When we visited you and Grandpa in New York City, my sister and I would travel alone together on the train into Grand Central from Connecticut. Our mother was hesitant at first when we were young. How would we know where to go? But you always said to us, "At the last stop, get off the train and follow the crowd. I'll meet you at the end of the platform." You positioned yourself always in the same spot near the railing, in your blue jacket with one hand up waving and a huge smile, our sense of relief and excitement. The use of taxis was not allowed. The sounds of traffic while we slept, Broadway shows, walking block after block, having a nightcap at your favorite bar. As children, playing Carmen Sandiego in your home office, near the bathroom of the toilet that flushed too loudly. realizing how small in the world we really are, the city feeling like a second home. You purchased land in Maine to make memories with grandchildren. Fires and music under the stars, hammocks and breweries, jams and jellies and apple cider, lunches by the water, orange life jackets and brutal canoeing lessons. You made us capsize repeatedly so we would know how to save ourselves. One night, we were all walking to the water. The full moon reflected and glistened. You said, "Take a picture with your mind." In Stonington at the beach, we would swim to the dock together. We'd climb up and lay in the sun to catch our breath before jumping back in for shore. I remember wondering if I would ever swim as strongly as you. At the Yellow House, we hosed off our sandy feet and hung our bathing suits on the porch railing. Thanksgiving was your holiday. You would plan in advance and we all would gather in Stonington. Your bare feet and apron, you relished in the memories being made before your eyes. We spent my 21st birthday together in the Azores. My first drink as a 21-year-old was blue and pretty. At our hotel, I received flowers from Carlos, a young admirer. You loved these memories. You primed me for a life of questioning norms and advocating for those treated as less than. You represented to us and the world a force that would not settle for less than equity. You were not afraid of being the first to fight because you knew you would not be the last. You always said to us at the last stop, "Get off the train and follow the crowd. I'll meet you at the end of the platform." It's nice to imagine that there is a platform after the final stop and you will be there waving. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. Next speaker is Jen's younger brother, Chris Boylan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Can everybody see me and hear me okay?
Yes.
Lovely. I am Chris Boylan. I am the son of Ben and Karen, the sister of Jen, our previous speaker, and also Carol Boylan, as well as the grandson of Betsy and Jim. I deliberately didn't prepare anything this evening because I wanted to use this space as a moment to reflect on two things. Betsy's utter mastery of the English language and an absolute feel for every room and any room she entered. She knew what to say, what not to say, when to say it and when not to say it. And as we know, most times it was saying it. I really appreciate her. I speak about her all the time, whether it's to passersby when they'd tell me, "Hey, you know, where are you from? Tell us something interesting about yourself." Or when it's reflecting on why I say I'm doing well instead of I'm doing good and why that feels so natural. So I appreciate everybody for being here. I appreciate Betsy and reflect on her fondly. And thank you everybody for this time.
Lily Cutler, if you're ready to speak, you are next.
There she is.
Hello.
Hi. I somewhat prepared something to say. That photo montage really, I had to go and kind of touch up my makeup because I just, where do I begin? Betsy was not my grandmother. I'm the daughter of Howard Cutler, who was the son of Rebecca Manning Cutler. And so I always called her Aunt Betsy, but we were some sort of cousins, something removed, and she could always figure it out, but I could never remember. I never bonded with my grandmother, Rebecca, and she was always fairly cold with me, and I felt a bit guilty that I always wished that Betsy was my grandmother. And in many ways, although she didn't care for everyone, and if she did care for someone, she would be rather ruthless in truth telling when she did something that she didn't quite approve of. Her love for me was very fierce, and I never quite knew why she took such a shine to me. But she did, and she was my mentor, and she was the fire under my petard and the greatest inspiration of my life. I think I probably feel her now as much as ever. I feel her everywhere. I feel her in everything I do. At the Manning family reunion, I remember sneaking away to smoke a cigarette, and I thought I was hidden, and Betsy was downstairs just glaring at me. And she gave me this and gave me about a 10-minute scolding, and I quit smoking because of Betsy. We often mailed each other email and snail mail all the time because I loved to read her writing. And so I'd like to read her last email to me was just a quick note on grammar. And it went, quote, of Betsy and me, you took ... unquote. Object of the preposition of. By the same token, quote, between you and me, which is often spoken as, quote, between you and I, unquote, which gives me goose flesh. Sigh. Editors are everywhere. Sorry. I also have very, very fond memories of the Yellow House and spending Thanksgiving there as a child, although the last time I was there for Thanksgiving, I believe the turkey wouldn't fit in the oven, which was an issue. Betsy's overarching message to me was always this, and she wrote it often: don't be so critical of yourself. She's my inspiration to be a writer, and although I never accepted her strong encouragement to become a journalist per se, I did accompany her to Jaws Camp in 2018, where we shared a room with adjacent beds. And at night, after she had taken her teeth out and was lying in bed, she would tell me jokes and tell me stories. And it was really at Jaws Camp that I fully understood how incredible this woman was and how revered she was and what a big deal she was to so many people. Although she never took credit. She never took credit. Even when she gave me a copy of The Girls in the Balcony, she said, oh, well, it's not, I didn't do any of that. I didn't do any of that. She was humble, yet completely rock solid in her strength and her values. As unshakable as her values were, I think they were just as unshakable as her love for her friends and family. And finally, I apologize for the time, but I want to read 2 anecdotes that she provided by request. This was in 2020. Number 1, once my mother, Elizabeth Manning Wade, of the well-known South Carolina Mannings, was reproved by someone aboard the train who saw Mrs. Wade's 5-year-old daughter licking a window pane on the Southern Railroad Pullman we were riding to start a summer vacation in Spartanburg, South Carolina. My mother said that she replied to the woman that I had already licked every piece of rolling stock wearing Southern Line's livery, and there was no point in worrying now. Thus did I presumably immunize myself against many vile diseases by passing them through an infantile gut. Lord knows I've outlived everyone except Aunt Rebecca, my grandmother, but she was a lawyer to beat the devil. Number 2, a bit later in our traveling lives, my baby sister Ellen was propped up on a pillow in a Pullman seat on the Crescent when a large group of large men, doubtlessly chewing cigars, lurched through to reach the dining car. One of these formidable men reached down and patted the top, still nearly bare, of Sister Ellen's head. Since the gent was clearly identified to all, including our mother, as the alarming Huey Long, our mother told everyone within hearing she was afraid that the baby would probably be bald for life. Not so, although the lovely black hair filled in slowly. Betsy was terrifying to some, including my dad, who I think was terrified of her up right until the end. And I feel so lucky to have been chosen by her in some way as someone who mattered to her, and she mattered to me more than I can express through words. Don't be so critical of yourself. I will remember that for the rest of my days. And gosh, I miss her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lily. That was wonderful.
And the RGB necklace, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg necklace, is for her.
Okay. The next speaker is my mother's longtime friend, Judy Berek.
Good evening. The fact that the previous speakers have not put me into a long-term crying jag shows great discipline on my part, because that is how I feel. I met Betsy and her long-term friend, Joan Cook, when we represented our respective unions at the Cornell School of Industrial Labor Relations monthly women's brown bag lunches in the early 70s. I represented 1199 hospital workers, and Betsy represented the Newspaper Guild. I was already a paid union official, and they were rank and file members. So I, in theory, was supposed to know something. Together, we helped found something called New York Trade Union Women, and then the National Coalition of Labor Union Women. And Betsy, till the end, always claimed that I pushed her to ask Harry Fisdell, whose title I don't remember, at the Newspaper Guild, to pay their way to Chicago, which is where the CLU convention was, and she was sure he wouldn't, and she went in and asked. And after he finished crapping his pants, he gave them the money because he was terrified. And I think Betsy would have taken over the union and sued the paper had I never given her that advice. But I always sort of felt good when she credited me for helping her stand up for herself. And one of the many sadnesses of Betsy's death is we now have a woman president of the AFL-CIO. And without that work that Betsy and I and thousands of other women did in the 70s, we would not have a woman president. And it's really quite wonderful to see. And I'm sorry she isn't here to see it with us. Now, Betsy introduced me to many things. I came from a very Jewish family in Brooklyn. I had probably never been to a bar. And the New York Times and 1199 were down the block from each other. And my union meetings usually ended around the same time Betsy got off her shift. And I would meet Betsy at Goff's for dinner. I would eat, they would drink, and sometimes eat. But it had never happened before. The other thing Betsy did for me and my nieces, and I will say my father, is she took each of my nieces one at a time to watch what was referred to as the New York Times going to bed, where she finished editing the last article or whatever the last front page article would be. And then we would go from the newsroom upstairs and watch the type get set for the last article and the page lock and the rubber mats get made and the metal mats get made and the metal mats go on the rollers. And the next thing we saw were bundled copies of the New York Times being loaded onto trucks. And it is something no one will ever see again. And after my first two nieces went, my father basically said, when you take Liz, who was the youngest, I have to go. And so my parents came too. And I would say he remembered it till the day he died. And I think my nieces will always remember it. And one of my nieces married somebody who always talked about being jealous because she came home with her name set in type from her trip to the New York Times, and he didn't have that. He's a very good husband. The jealousy hasn't gone. Betsy was a fabulous friend. She was an incredibly generous woman. You've heard this from other people. Her generosity and her kindness almost equaled her courage and her smarts. She was extraordinary in every way. When she moved to the Upper West Side, we started to hang out. We would go to the JCC to exercise 3 mornings a week and then eat breakfast together, which was the part both of us liked. I visited her in Stonington. I visited her in Maine. We ate countless oysters together during happy hour. And Jim, I saw your commitment to meet me for oysters as soon as you're back in the city. We would go to museums just in case you think we did nothing but eat, and sometimes the theater. When Betsy got sick and she could no longer exercise, I made it my mission to feed her. And although it was really biologically impossible for her to gain weight based on the location of her colon cancer, I tried. And the most successful piece of my mission to feed her was creating an addiction to my applesauce. And when Betsy got really sick, I got COVID. And I had to get a negative COVID test fast enough so I could make enough applesauce to deliver it to Betsy and Jim. And I have to say, her incredible children and grandchildren. I mean, once I was well, I would go there a couple of times a week. And Jim was never alone with Betsy. There was almost always a grandchild, sometimes a child, sitting in the room with Betsy, talking to her. And it was the saddest thing in the world to watch one of your dearest friends die. But to watch her die basically in the arms of a loving family was truly incredible. And I cannot tell you how much I love and admire the way in which you took care of my friend and helped her deal with what she was terrified of, which was the end of life. And I think she did it gracefully. And the only reason she could do it that gracefully was because of what you did to help her. And I just have complete and utter admiration for all of you. And I will always love you because you're not just biologically the children of Betsy. You clearly, in your guts and heart, are the children of Betsy. And it is just a joy to be with you, to cry and be sad together. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. That was excellent. Our next speaker is Barbara Garson. She is the author of the play McBird, which people in Betsy's generation will probably remember.
And many books.
And Barbara's books about work, like All the Livelong Day, also tied their interests together. Barbara.
Hello. Hello. I met Betsy. I became friends with Betsy by insulting her. We were, this is maybe 55 years ago. We were speaking on some panel about women journalists in the media. And she was labeled Betsy Wade, New York Times. So every time I would make some point, I would turn around and say, of course, you at the Times will take a decade before you find out that the CIA helped overthrow Allende or whatever. I mean, it's so long ago, I don't even remember what outrage I was outraged at. And Betsy, she never said anything. And I was a kid, but I was more ignorant than I should have been as a kid. And of course, Betsy, you the New York Times. Well, of course, Betsy, I later learned, was the head of the guild, the head of the union at the Times. Betsy organized the suit and was the main plaintiff, the lead plaintiff, the suit, the women's suit at the New York Times. That's against the Times. So you might say in some ways she was against the Times, but you know something? It is also true. Betsy really was the New York Times. I mean, she loved newspapers. She loved the paper. Everything she was doing was to make it better and to bring justice to everybody else around. And never, never, never did she ask me why I said bad things about her, or I think she hardly remembered, which is another trait that let her do so much that she did. Everybody often it's hard to understand how Betsy could do all the things we're doing, because these are family friends. You're not talking about all the big union leaders who could be here also talking about Betsy. But Betsy could do so many different things. Like one time, she was sitting in my house and she whipped out a tape measure and she measured my tablecloth. And she said, "Do you like red or blue?" I said, "Red." I don't know what it was about. And then she turned up a short time later with one of those wonderful check tablecloths, the kind they have in diners, that beautiful pattern that, does anybody else have one of those tablecloths? Wow, good, because I still have it. It's in shreds. I think I'm going to use it the next time I have company, though it's in shreds. Well, how can the person who is fighting in these contentious battles with contentious organizations be doing all these things? And I think the key is that she didn't really have resentment. Oh, she knew she had enemies, but she knew she was right, and it wasn't about them. I don't think she realized how much they personally resented her, but she didn't spend any time on those resentments, just like she didn't remember that I had accused her of being all these evil conservative New York Times things. She just didn't remember it. And that lack of resentment and that sense of just doing what's right as an ordinary thing, tremendous moral sense, I think that enabled her to do all these little things that you rarely find associated with a person of Betsy's stature, that they could do all these little things. I mean, she was just amazing at it. Now, she tolerated me, not only my accusing her, but she tolerated me in an area that was very important to her. Chris and Lily have both mentioned Betsy's love of the English language. She's certainly the only person that the Solorians ever gave a lifetime award to who was a copy editor. I mean, she did some reporting at the end of her life, but who was a copy editor. And she loved, just as she loved the Times, she loved it to be perfect. And when computers came in, now think how long ago Betsy and I got to know each other, we started to email. And at first, Betsy used to correct my notes to her because I really can't spell. I can't see typos. If I went to school now, they would say I was dyslexic. And at first, Betsy used to correct them all. And eventually she said to me, "Okay, Barbara, I'm not going to correct you, but you have to learn how to spell Betsy." And I did with one E. I used to put it with two E's. And these were, I mean, I was about to say politically that it's too bad she isn't with us to see the Guild expanding the way it is right now. There was a long, sad period when newspapers were in decline, and it was hard to be a union fighting newspapers that were falling apart anyway and closing down. But now a lot of the news outlets have found ways to actually be alive and survive online. And the News Guild, it's no longer called the Newspaper Guild, is expanding like crazy. And I was about to say a kind of a cliched thing about how, it's too bad Betsy can't be with us to see this great expansion of the union that she helped create and keep alive during that terrible interregnum when it seemed like there would be no newspapers and no unions. And yes, I'm sorry that Betsy can't be with us for political reasons like that, but I just want her to be with us. I want to see her in Maine. I want her to boss me around because it doesn't bother me. I could stand up to it. And I just want her to be with us. And if anything proves that death is stupid, it's this. I mean, I want Betsy to be there. That's all.
Thank you, Barbara. That was excellent. Our next speaker is Manhattan Borough President Gale A. Brewer.
Farmer.
Oh, sorry.
She is elected
No.
to something else.
Okay.
Well, it's the same old Gale is what I say. But I do want to say, I really think that Betsy Wade is probably the most beloved, if I fix this thing, person in anywhere, any place. I mean, I don't know her as long as all of you, but I can say when her byline existed at the time, everybody read the article and knew it was absolutely perfect and so excited that whatever she was saying. And of course, as a women's leader in the trade union movement, as Judy Berek knows better than I do, she was a hero to all of us. So, but I only got to know her recently. Penelope Cox, who works in my office, and we had decided, but mostly with Betsy's input, that at the gallery, we call it the Maggie Peyton Gallery because she was a longtime employee, longtime of the borough president's office, but also very close to Bella Abzug. And when she died, we decided to name the Maggie Peyton Gallery after her. So it's always had, every couple of months we would have a new exhibit and we would try to have different artists from the city of New York. And Betsy decided after running into me that it should be something to do with women's suffrage and so on. Oh my goodness, she and Penelope spent, this is 2017, I don't know how many hours, and we called Bella's daughters, we called my friend Ross Graham, we called everybody we could think of to say, what kind of posters do you have in your living room, in your closet, in your basement, from the women's movement? And of course, she as a curator put together an absolutely phenomenal inaugural exhibit of the Maggie Peyton Gallery. It was amazing. And she even, we love her notes. I always say, because she was a writer, because she had something called an envelope and a stamp. When you say that to the young people, it's like envelopes and stamps. What's that, Gale? And I still write letters. I can't write ever as well as Betsy Wade, but every time I got a letter from her, it was an exciting moment for me. So she did write in March of 2017. There's actually a wonderful woman, Pauline Toole, who runs the municipal archives of the city of New York. I love archives, and so did Betsy. So she said to Commissioner Toole that the borough president's show on women in politics has given me some interesting hours in the last couple of weeks. She spent so much time on this, including meeting you in the library on March 2nd, and she looked forward to meeting you again, meeting Pauline Toole at the show's formal opening in March 20, because we were doing it during Women's History Month. Gale Brewer summoned me. No, I didn't summon her, but that's okay, to this task because I wrote her to learn what had become of the suffrage centennial for 2017 that had been discussed back in July 2014. Betsy Wade never forgot anything. Happily for me, she popped me into a vacant chair assisting Penelope Cox on the current show. Of course, she did more work than I can ever tell you. And then she keeps writing, but having run into you, Pauline Toole, in your cleaning task at the library and learning from Penelope that you were involved in the suffrage project, I write to find out if I can play a role in this further project. My husband, this is a wonderful story too, Jim Boylan, thank you, Jim, for being here, a Columbia PhD in American history, and I created a women's history walk in downtown for the then editor of Women's E-News. So we have done a great deal of research in the area, both physical and political. We also twice visited Carrie Chapman Catt's childhood home in Charles City, Iowa. now designated the headquarters of the 19th Amendment Society. We were visiting Charles City, my husband's birthplace, and I ended up writing a piece about the farmhouse, which had become a museum and headquarters after years of private ownership with no admission. I hope to hear from you and get to play a part in this centennial. Best wishes, Betsy Wade. And that was dated March 14th, 2017. And needless to say, the Commissioner Tools played a huge role in getting this exhibit up. And it was the inaugural, and I have to say the best attended. We had about 100 different gallery openings, and by far the best attended, but it gets better. And then January 2020, we decided to have, again, with the unbelievably fabulous Betsy Wade, we were going to, for Women's History Month, you're going to laugh when you hear this or cry, March 1st, 2020. We were going to have the opening, and again, of suffrage, the Women's Suffrage Month of the women. I don't know if you can see it, but this wonderful book, Pioneers of Women's Rights, Manhattan, which is all written by Jim Boylan and Betsy Wade. And it is an amazing walking tour description. It has stunning illustrations. It's got the writing of a lifetime. And it was published by my office, but it was written by them. And it's Pioneers of Women's Rights in Manhattan, a walking tour. This book is so popular. And the guide is part of our Women's History Month celebration. And this is what the amazing date was, Sunday, March 1st, 2020. And you know what happened that month. And so it was a packed house. We didn't cancel it, but I have to say soon after that, everything was canceled. And it was a packed house. I remember Betsy and Jim sitting on the sofa, if you could call it that, in our lobby with grandchildren everywhere, as well as children. Her grandchildren adored her, as you know, because you're all here and you know better than I how fabulous she was. And it's all about Lower Manhattan. It's all about U.S. women's rights. And it was the last event our office would hold and did hold until October 2021. And we do not forget it. So I have to say this booklet, we were very instrumental with Pam Elam, and Betsy was there at the August 26, 2020 inauguration of the Women's Suffrage Monument in Central Park. And, you know, 2020. And it was such a moment because the statue had taken us 5 years. This booklet was the most popular aspect of the opening. It was on the table. They went like hotcakes. But Betsy was there, and she, I don't think she was feeling great, but she certainly came, and she was a huge part of the celebration. And Pam Elam, who was the head of the suffragists monument, and one who got the whole thing off the ground, although Penelope and I had a lot to do to push the agencies. But Betsy was always behind supporting, you know, the wind beneath their sails, no matter what it was, that when she was interested in it, in her, you know, best way, more than any other human being, she helped you make that project happen. And I'm sure there are thousands of stories like that. But that's ours, and we miss her. Thank you.
Thank you, Gale. That's very good. I love it. Our next speaker is Mary C. Curtis.
Thank you. Yeah, I see so many familiar faces, and I haven't been to the Times for a while, but and I haven't been in touch with so many folks, but that's not the case with Betsy. When I came from the Baltimore Sun to the New York Times, I was young, but I was kind of experienced. I had been an editor, a manager, and yet a lot of the folks at the Times would approach me and ask if I was a minority intern. And it became a little bit of a running joke, though sometimes not so funny. But Betsy wasn't that person. She was in travel then, but she would make her rounds in the newsroom, and she knew who I was. And she welcomed me and encouraged me and supported me. And that meant so much, especially coming from the legendary Betsy Wade. And I was so pleased that we remained pretty close when I left the paper, and we were able to connect as members of Journalism and Women's Symposium. As folks have said, that's an organization that meant so much to so many people. And then we both served on the board of the Ann O'Hare McCormick Scholarships. And that gave us a chance to meet each year for the really tough task of choosing among an incredibly talented and deserving group of women and award scholarships. And that was also something that was so important to Betsy. There is a scholarship in her name there. And when we had to hash out these applications, she even invited me to stay at her home, which was so generous. She and Jim were always so kind and generous, and it was such a treat. And it was also amazing to me that she's included her friendship to the next generation, which includes my son, Zane, because our families spent a little time together. And at one luncheon conversation, Betsy and Zane bonded over a love of certain kinds of music. And to his delight and surprise, a little bit after that, she sent him in the mail a box of some historical records and sheet music. And that was who she was. She was strong and uncompromising, and she left an amazing legacy in all of those she nurtured, mentored, and lifted up. And I was lucky to be one of those folks, and I miss her terribly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our next speaker, according to the agenda, is David Dunlap. David, are you there?
I am.
Yes.
My name is David Dunlap. I'm a retired New York Times reporter and lately a curator of the museum at the Times. It opened in September on the 15th floor of the Times building at the south end of Pulitzer Corridor. Betsy taught me how to pronounce that word correctly. Like the chicken. Of the thousands of women and men who have worked at the Times during its 170 years, only a handful are represented by photographs in the museum's display cases. Space constrained us. However, we chose to exhibit 2 photographs of Betsy Wade, both of which you saw in that lovely montage earlier. In one, she stands alongside 6 other courageous women who staked their own Times careers to battle for equality. Andrea Skinner, Eileen Shanahan, Grace Glick, Nancy Davis, Joan Cook, and Louise Carini. In the other, Betsy stands alone at a microphone during the 1974 Times stockholders meeting. She is directly and publicly challenging the corporate and family leaders of the company for which she works to nominate a woman as director whose surname is not Sulzberger. She tells the board, we need to speak with diverse voices and decide with diverse brains. That's why there are 2 photographs of Betsy Wade in the new museum at the Times. And incidentally, there is only 1 photo of Abe.
David, I assume you're done. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Donna Cartwright. Ms. Cartwright, are you online?
Okay, should I just go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
I first met Betsy Wade when I was hired onto the foreign news copy desk of the New York Times in 1977. She was my teacher and my mentor as an editor. She was, unlike others, she was never harsh or cruel. She was a great teacher. I also particularly want to stress Betsy's role as the person who really knocked down the doors in the newspaper guild to the leadership of women. This was an organization that all too often overlooked women or even was abusive to women. I particularly remember her telling me about one.
Hello.
Hi. Problem? She told me about a guild convention in the early 1980s where she and the other women present were subjected to round after round of sexist insults by their male colleagues. A truly disgraceful performance. But Betsy was undeterred. She fought on. She ran for union office. She won and she lost. But overall, she changed the ethos of the Guild in terms of women in leadership, which took a good long time, a couple of decades. And then lastly, I would say, just on a personal note, that in 1998, when I decided that I was going to be the first person to come out as transgender on the staff of the New York Times, I went first to Betsy to tell her and to ask for her guidance and support. And she was generous, as she always had been. I was terribly moved and saddened when I learned of her terminal illness, and glad that I did get to see her one more time at the end of last year. So I'll always remember Betsy, both as an editor and a trade unionist.
Thank you, Donna. Eve Mayer, are you back online?
Richard, I have to tell you that you've put together the warmest, most wonderful memorial for your mother that gives such genuine picture of who she was, what she was, how extraordinary she was, both in her profession and personally. She had her convictions. She knew exactly what she believed in, what should be done in cases where something had to be done. And I remember something that none of you will have remembered. And I wish you could see me, incidentally. I don't know how to put myself on. At any rate, Betsy and I were in the class of 52 at the Graduate School of Journalism. This would be our 70th anniversary this year. And there are many, many more women there now than there were at the time. We were very, very few. And there were many men who had been in the Army with much more experience. We were kids out of college. And I don't remember what precipitated this, but suddenly we were standing and several very large men in the class were also standing, and something was going on at this very prestigious school. And suddenly Betsy grabbed my hand and said, "Oh, Eve, do you think we're going to be able to make it here?" Sid and I were so happy when you moved to Manhattan, but we didn't see enough of each other. At any rate, thank you all for the memories. I think this was wonderful.
Thank you, Eve. Our next to last speaker is Jan Paschal. Jan, are you online?
Yes, I'm here with Carolyn Purcell.
Oh, good. Excellent.
I'm sitting with Carolyn. We both love Betsy, like everyone here does. Thank you, Jim, Richard, and Ben for putting together this wonderful memorial. It's so Betsy and it's so lovely. Betsy plunged into her work for the Anne O'Hare McCormick scholarships in the only way that she knew how to do it, which was 200%. All of her brilliance, all of her passion, love, determination. That's how she did it. And she kept on doing it. up until the last few weeks of her life, which was amazing. Her last project for us involved extending the Ann O'Hare McCormick Scholarship brand, where it's had been active since the first scholarships given in Ann's name in 1955 at Columbia Journalism School. To 2019, we expanded to Newmark CUNY, and then right at the end, with Betsy's, I'd say, not just encouragement, but leadership, even from her bed, to expand it to New York University, which is the alma mater of Carolyn Purcell, who's hosting me. Carolyn's our scholarship chair. And we had some notes from Betsy that weren't suggestions, as everybody here knows. She said, "Can we get this done?" And we said, "Yes, we can." So when Carolyn told her that we had indeed worked it out with the administration of the graduate journalism program at NYU, it was done. Carolyn was customizing an application for the spring of 2021 for applicants. She emailed Betsy, and we got this immediate response, this email from her dated September 9th, 2020. "This is such good news. I will get my checkbook ready. I am so, so proud of your work, you two. Love, Betsy." And I mean, just to think that this brilliant, generous woman applied all of her love to this project. And when she sent the check, classic Betsy, she was always looking ahead to the future. She dated it 2030, which in my really kind of meltdown state, thinking of how, we weren't going to be able to hold on to her here on this planet forever. I didn't notice that she dated it 10 years in the future. Betsy got involved with us by volunteering to serve on the board in October 2012, right after Judith Criss memorial service up at Columbia. She came up to me, and of course I knew who she was, but she introduced herself, and I was intimidated like everyone is. And she said, "I take it you need another board member, and I volunteer." And it was like such a gift from the gods that Betsy Wade wants to be part of what we're doing. And then she plunged in, gave generously, figured out clever ways to raise money, including thinking, maybe I'll slip into the New York Times and be by a certain elevator when the publisher comes down in the evening and chat with him about the scholarships and get a gift for the scholarships, which she did. She brought, friends, accomplished journalists onto the board: Mary C. Curtis, Susan Shira, Carol Jenkins, Cheryl McCarthy. She was very proud of everyone. She was so proud of Carolyn. She said the way Carolyn runs our scholarship contest, that Carolyn could, run the Times with her eyes closed, or run IBM, the administrative ability and the journalistic talent that Carolyn has. And she was just a great mentor to our scholars. We would have welcome events, brunches, or dinners to give them their checks in person, and it always would involve wine. And she'd give the scholars gifts of the book, The Girls on the Balcony, give them some fine-tuned points about wine, about meeting deadlines, and loved keeping up with them, and loved seeing their accomplishments. And I think she would love it if she knew that, like right now at the Times, there are some young Ann O'Hare McCormick scholars. Lauren McCarthy, who's finishing her 2-year degree, has her own author's page. Valerie Hopkins just joined the Times Moscow Bureau. She's had several page one stories. Laura Mofta on the TV unit that produces The Weekly. And Tina Kelso Martin, also known as Christina Kelso, who was our first recipient of a McCormick Scholarship given in memory of Betsy's dear friend, Rita Henley Jensen. Tina just had her first bylined camera work story on the Times, and she joined the Times full-time in March after starting as a part-time contract assistant video producer after graduating from Columbia in the documentary program. This year we have 6 scholars, and 4 of the scholarships were given in Betsy's name. She, also put an emphasis on let's find as many talented outstanding young women of color and women from unrepresented areas to support their studies in the Graduate School of Journalism. I think she would be thrilled if she knew that our first recipient of an Ann O'Hare McCormick Scholarship at NYU is Debbie Balthazar from West Orange, New Jersey, a woman who wants to be a science journalist. She's brilliant. She taught junior high science as a substitute teacher while working for Patch. I mean, that's someone who really wants to get a byline and wants to do the work. She'd be thrilled if she could see that Sherelle Dorsey, whom she knew, is a friend of Mary C. Curtis's. Sherelle has grown her network of The Plug, which focuses on covering Black tech and has partnerships with Bloomberg. You know, she would love it if she could see that Casey Parks, our first openly lesbian scholar, is covering gender for the Washington Post. She just joined there. She thrilled in that. She also delighted in the accomplishments of women in the Newswomen's Club of New York. It was women from the club who in 1954 founded the McCormick Fund. We all feel thrilled that we got to work with Betsy, learn from her. She knew that as a copy editor, I was a perfectionist. I fretted over sending emails out to the board. And sometimes she'd call me at 7 in the morning and say, Jan, stop fussing over it. Just send it. Done is better than perfect. And I think that's when I realized I loved her even more than I thought I could, was that she was saying, you know, get over it, just do it. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Richard, and Ben, the grandchildren, for sharing Betsy with us and for giving me the chance to talk about her passion for the scholarships.
Thank you, Jan. That's wonderful. I'm going to try to circle back. We missed one speaker, my uncle, John Buzbee. John, are you online? Doesn't sound like John's online. Bill, did you want to step in his place?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm Bill Buzbee, nephew of Betsy and son of John Buzbee, who is going to speak. And what my dad wanted to share was a few things, but he wanted to read a bit of an essay that my late sister Lynn wrote about Betsy. So I will do that in a moment. But I will say, just sitting here, years ago, I rented a room from Joan Cook and saw many of the faces I'm seeing here at dinners that Joan and Betsy would sponsor and all sit together. And I just remember the joy that all of you felt in each other's company, and both how Betsy and Joan always just sort of glowed with joy at these gatherings of their friends and colleagues who had been such fighters. So it's great to see all of you. And then Richard and Boylan's, thanks for sharing all this. So my sister Lynn wrote an essay, and this is just the last page that my dad wanted to share. So she wrote this a long time ago. And she said, 2 years ago, I went to Radcliffe College one evening to hear my Aunt Betsy speak about her experience of bringing a class action suit against the New York Times. Betsy and her colleague talked about the discrimination they and their female colleagues had experienced at the Times and the extraordinary discrepancies between how the male and female staff were treated. They also talked of all they sacrificed in their careers by bringing suit against the Times. I listened to her in awe and with a great sense of respect and pride. I realized that because of Betsy, many women my age have a better chance in their workplaces. I also began to admit that I cared deeply about this movement. Working now, as my sister did, in the battered women's movement, I could not call myself anything but a feminist. From my birthday last year, Betsy gave me a book called Let Us Now Praise Famous Women. 15 years ago, that book would have been put away and ignored. Today, it sits on my coffee table. My birthday this year fell on a day when Betsy and Jim, my uncle, were having a party at their home in New York City. At the party were journalists, professors, and writers. I was no longer the silent observer. I so enjoyed the conversation that I did not want to leave. At one point, Betsy asked everyone to gather together, and she brought out a birthday cake for me, and everyone sang and toasted my birthday. As I hugged her in appreciation, hold on, I'm reading a photograph, I felt I was embracing all that I had fought against for so long. I also realized that my life hadn't started over again, Rather, it had come full circle and it all made sense. So that's all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
That's the end of the speakers. My father would like to say a few words in closing.
Am I in focus here somewhere?
Yep, you are in.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank all of you who came to attend this event, and family, friends, colleagues, for speaking or listening. Move over. And for the support you have offered us during the past long year. I would like to read a brief poem by one of Betsy's favorite writers, Grace Paley, which appeared in the New Yorker the year before she, Grace Paley, died. It's called One Day. One day, one of us will be lost to the other. This has been talked about, but lightly turning away shyness, this business of confronting the preference for survival, my mother said. The children are grown. We are both so sick. Let us die together. My father replied, no, no, you will be well. He lied, of course. I want you in the world, whether I'm in it or not. Your spirit, I probably mean. There is always something to say in the end. Speaking without breath, one of us will be lost to the other. And so it happened. We both persisted through long lives until at last we had granddaughters and great-granddaughters and one grandson, fulfilling Betsy's wish for the daughter she never had. Perhaps not all of you are aware of the soul-wrenching price Betsy paid for her longevity. Now looking back, I realize more than ever that she struggled ahead for the good of all of us, her colleagues, her friends, and most of all, her family. We all benefited that she could offer that what she offered of her unquenchable desire to make us her beneficiaries. And I, given 68 years of her love and guidance, was the most fortunate recipient. And I will remain grateful to the end. Thank you.
Well, that is the end of the formal part of our memorial. Those of you who are Zoom savvy, we've created a bunch of breakout rooms